Today I want to show you how to work Judy's Magic Cast On. I believe the first place this was actually written was in the Knitty magazine, and I'll share a link for that as well on the page here. What it is a cast on that you're actually able to knit in two directions from. It's shown and used most often on the website for toe-up socks, which would frequently be done using a magic loop, which you'd use a very long circular cable, somewhat like this. But there's many more uses for it also. I haven't used it yet, but I think a very interesting way of doing it would be for the center of a circular shawl, or possibly even in a place where you were going to use a provisional cast on and you needed to work in both directions. In that case, instead of using one singular circular needle like this, what you'd probably want to do is use two different needles so that you can set one set of stitches aside to be worked later. So to get started, hold the tips of your needles together like this, and you're going to have them pointing in the left to the left like this. Then you want to get your working yarn and you put the tail between the two needles. Now, in terms of the actual tail, you want to have a tail long enough to be able to create half of your stitches. If you're just doing toe-up socks, you don't need a very long tail because it's only a couple of stitches. However, if you're using it instead of a provisional cast on, the likelihood is you may have a great deal of stitches to work with. So in this case, I'm not going to have too long a tail, but I'll just leave it hang like this in between the stitches. Now, you'll take this tail and bring it towards the back of your work, and you bring your working yarn towards the front. So you can see I'm actually twisting the yarn around the stitches like that. Then you're going to actually hold your tail with your finger like this, and with your thumb you'll hold your working yarn, and that's going to hold that loop of yarn in place here. So quite similar to the setup for a long tail cast on. So now what we're going to do is we've already got one stitch on this needle, so we want one stitch on our bottom needle. To put the stitch on the bottom needle, we're going to lift it up high over the top yarn, hook it around and pull it down. And so now we have got one stitch, our first stitch on the top and our first stitch on the bottom. Then from there we're going to get the next stitch on the top, which will come from the bottom yarn, and the next stitch on the bottom one, which goes to the top. So I kind of find myself singing a bit of a sing-song, kind of like, you know, up, down, and you'll eventually find that you'll get into the swing of it. So I'm going to start off with my next stitch on the top. So I'm going to bring it down, bring the yarn between the two needles, and wrap it over the top of my first top needle here. Then I'm going to lift it up and hook it over the top of the top yarn. And now I've got one more stitch on each needle. And you just keep going like that till you have the desired number of stitches on each side. Now try to keep the two needles relatively close together, because it means that you'll have a tidier cast on at this point. So I'll do a few more so you can see how it works again. Bring it down between the needles for my top one and wrap it around. Lift it up and over to get the next stitch on the bottom one. So now 3 on each side, and I'll do the bottom again, down between the needles and around over my top needle, and lift it up over the top and wrap it over my bottom needle. And now you can see I've got 4 stitches in the top and 4 in the bottom. Now if you want to work from this point on using magic loop, you're going to start working the bottom stitches. You can see here there's a loose bit of yarn, but we'll fix that once we get over. So we're going to turn them around, and I'm going to pull my bottom needle out the same way as if you're going to do magic loop. Now you want to keep an eye and make sure that loop doesn't get lost down there. What you want to do is take the tail of the yarn and kind of hold it with your left needle there in place, but wrap it over so that the two of them are twisting together. Get my working yarn here and my working needle and pull it out so that I've got a loop on each side to create my magic loop. And then I'm just going to actually knit these stitches right across off the needle here. My 4 stitches on this side. And then when I've finished working on that side, because it's a magic loop, I'm going to turn it around to pull this needle through and pull this one out. Push this up and pull that one out. Make sure I've got my working yarn and not my tail. And I'm going to knit on the other side. Just tighten up that tail a little bit. So now you can actually see this is what the center of it will look like. You've got stitches with no obvious beginning that are worked in both directions. Now, if you were doing it as a provisional cast on, you're going to turn around and you'll start working on those stitches, but the stitches on the other side you'll actually just let sit to use for later on. So just work on the one side and go back and forth in rows as though you're just knitting in rows. And that's how you use the Judy's Magic Cast On.